Bill Carney will monitor the chat and ask the congressman your questions. So now I'm going to turn it over to Bell.
It's a pleasure to be here. Nothing gives me more pleasure than to introduce you, Jared, to this large audience gathered here today to hear directly from their dear friend, their champion of climate action, and now congressional point person on climate change, confirmed by the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. The Climate Action Working Group, under the leadership of Doug Wilson, followed your role as a member of the House Select Committee on the climate crisis and formulated our own pillars. We sent these to you when we learned that you were going to Glasgow, and thinking that others might be interested in what local climate action looks like in Marin. We are poised again to ask your help in understanding the options the US has in shifting away from oil, gas, and coal, and averting a drastic rise in climate temperatures. Without major new policies to speed up the transition to wind, solar, and other clean energy, the US is likely to fall far short of meeting the president's climate policy goals. These policies and solutions are embedded in both the Build Back Better Act, the infrastructure legislation, and other initiatives. Help us too to figure out ways that Marin can be most effective and useful in getting the job done. We have 4 primary questions, and our expectation is that you will be able to address these within the next 20 minutes, with approximately 5 minutes or however you want to space them. And next we will turn to the questions from those present today. And Bill Carney is monitoring the chat and will pose these questions directly to you. The first question that we want to ask is, what is the future of the Build Back Better Act and its climate change provisions? And if you could respond to that, and then when that's done, then I'll ask you the second question, and then the third question and the fourth question, unless you want to answer them all together. So it's up to you. Thank you so much, Congressman Huffman, for being with us.
All right. Well, thanks, Bell. So we'll dive into that first question, but before I do that, let me just say good morning and hello to all of you. I went ahead and switched to the gallery view because with a group this big, it's fun to see so many friends and so many great local environmental leaders, local and beyond. This is really a wonderful gathering of people that I have a lot of respect and admiration for. And we've been working together for many, many years. So let's keep it up. These are challenging times. It's like a rolling inflection point, and we need each other. Sometimes we need to, just shout or tweet into the void because these can be very frustrating times, and that's okay. We got to maintain our sanity. But we also need the power that comes from working together and joining forces and talents. And that's what you're doing here at MCL, and I'm really proud. I do brag about you, Bell, and so, whether it's in Glasgow or any place else, I like to tell folks about the kind of principled leadership and action-oriented civic engagement I just see all the time from you and others in this great community that I get to represent. So thank you for that. Thanks for the gushing introduction. I don't have walk-up music for these remarks, but I've got Belle Cole trumpeting my resume or whatever. She does it all the time, and it's wonderful. I'm blushing, so thank you. Look, you want to know about the Build Back Better Act? It's a great opening question because when we think about climate action, I can't think of anything bigger or more important that we've been able to push right to the brink of enactment than the Build Back Better Act. It's not perfect. It is less than what I hoped it would be a few months ago, back when we had a clean electricity performance program that I thought would have done a pretty good job of finishing the job, decarbonizing the power sector. There were a few other things that fell out, but given what we're up against, given the the virtual non-margins we have to work with in both the House and the Senate, I think it's nothing short of remarkable that we were able to get this out of the House of Representatives, losing only, I think, a single Democratic vote, and that we have been poised to get it to President Biden's desk, but for a single U.S. senator. That's sort of where we are, and that look, it's not victory, but it is basically the brink of victory if we can figure out how to get past Joe Manchin. So the best part of Build Back Better in its current form are the tax credits, really powerful financial incentives to move clean energy forward, the additional investments in charging infrastructure, the EV tax credits that'll really go a long way towards speeding up this electrification of the transportation sector. Those are all wonderful things. Of course, I've got some personal favorites in there too, because as great as it was when Joe Biden put out an executive order to electrify the federal vehicle fleet, we've got a very recalcitrant bureaucracy in many of these agencies, none worse than the U.S. Postal Service, which of course is run by this political hack from the Trump world, Louis DeJoy. So we had 6.5. We do have $6.5 billion in Build Back Better to tackle that, to take the largest civilian fleet in the world, the Postal Service fleet, which is falling apart and blowing up on any given day, and electrify it very quickly and put charging infrastructure in every postal facility in America. That'd be a big jumpstart for those medium and larger vehicles that we need to fully electrify transportation. So many good things just right on the edge of victory, and we've just got to finish the job. You asked what is the fate, or what are the chances of Build Back Better? In the sense that we have a single U.S. senator to persuade, I think that's pretty good. That ought to be manageable. But that U.S. senator is a real dinosaur, and he's difficult. I'm being charitable when I describe him that way. There are more colorful terms I could use. So we have got to get past Joe Manchin. I don't want to offer false hope, but I guess what I would say, there are many things in Build Back Better that I'm excited about and support, even beyond climate. There's a lot of really important social investments. But I don't think the climate piece is a showstopper with Joe Manchin. We didn't just pass this bill and hope that it would work for Joe Manchin. We were actually vetting this with Manchin and his team at every step as we move the bill through the House. So we have a fairly informed sense of confidence that this can pass muster with Manchin. The question is, how will the rest of the package come together? When will it come together? The Senate is just a maddeningly slow, plodding institution. And so, I think in some ways the chances are quite good. In other ways, we are at the mercy of the vicissitudes of the United States Senate. And that's, always a bit of an uncertain situation.
Well, that's a good lead into that terrific, that important subject. So the second question is, what specifics in the $1 trillion infrastructure bill affect Marin? And also, and whether the climate change provisions by themselves are likely to be important as we go forward?
Yeah, so this is the piece that did get to Joe Biden's desk, and the $1 trillion is a bit misleading. There's actually, I think, about $650 billion in new spending. What this bill is really the surface transportation authorization that we do every few years in the ordinary course of things, but then some other stuff that was added onto it. Some of it is very good. We do need to make huge investments in modernizing the grid and energy transmission build out. We do need to invest in a national EV charging system, although the numbers in that bipartisan bill are paltry. We need to do a bunch of things, broadband infrastructure. So, there's some really good things in it, but you know how this all came to be, right? Joe Biden had this big, expansive vision of Build Back Better. He also is a creature of the United States Senate and someone who hangs on to this ideal of bipartisanship. He really wants things to be bipartisan, I guess, in the nostalgic sense that he and some others feel like the Senate used to be. And so the one piece of his agenda that I guess was thought that could be bipartisan was this traditional infrastructure piece. And that's fine. I want as much of our work to be bipartisan as possible. It's more durable when you do it that way. It's less subject to getting whacked by the next wave election that moves another party into power. So that's fine. But the price of being bipartisan right now in the United States Senate, at least, is that you have to make a whole bunch of concessions to the fossil fuel industry. So in addition to the good things in that traditional infrastructure bill, there's some bad things. There's a $25 billion loan guarantee for a new LNG facility in Alaska. That's 3 times the amount that is in that bill for EV charging. So that kind of tells you, how you get your bipartisanship these days with Lisa Murkowski and folks like that. You give things away to the fossil fuel industry. There are NEPA waivers for natural gas gathering lines. There's other environmental streamline that will surely be used to try to move forward more fossil fuel infrastructure. So, it's a mix of good and bad. And a lot of the things that could be good in that bill are just sort of sent to states in a block grant kind of way. And so I'm getting back to the answer to your specific question, which was about California and Marin County. I think we can feel pretty comfortable that the funding that comes to California and that makes its way down to Marin County is going to be put to work in service of emissions reduction and good, clean and green infrastructure. We will make sure that happens because that's who we are. The funding that goes to Texas and Florida and other places, I don't think we can be quite so sanguine.
Yeah.
The Biden administration is going to do what it can, I think, to try to direct this funding in a way that is, less harmful. But it, by virtue of the way this law is worded, it's going to be hard. In some of these other states. So I don't know if that answers your question. The specific dollars are going to be coming forward in the days ahead. In fact, I think today is the day that they're going to roll out the bridge funding formula that will tell us how much we get here in California on bridge funding. And you're going to see a bunch of these other things, begin to be fleshed out at the state level, which will in turn kind of give us a sense at the local level of what's coming our way.
Okay, so the third question is, we're likely to have some compromises by the executive taking on responsibility. So what executive orders and regulatory actions on climate change should we track?
There have been some nice executive orders. President Biden really hit the ground running. He was very strong in defense of climate science and trying to restore the integrity of science across a bunch of agencies that had been very compromised, obviously, during the Trump administration. He got us back into the Paris climate agreement.
Yeah.
He put a moratorium on new fossil fuel development. Now we have lost ground since then, in part due to a court decision, but in part, I think, because some in his administration have been weak-kneed about fully tackling the need to just stop developing fossil fuel in our public lands and in our oceans. So, we could go through a bunch of the executive orders that have come down, but I guess you asked about what we should focus on, and what I would suggest is maybe a couple of executive orders that have not happened, but should, I believe. One of them, now that we've got all of this money coming through the Department of Transportation, I think the Department of Transportation should do a rulemaking on climate pollution as it spends on transportation infrastructure, and that should happen. That should be happening right now. So I really think we need to push the administration for a focused rulemaking from the Department of Transportation. The bigger one the one that maybe has even more potential if we can't get Congress to act, is invoking emergency power under the I believe it's the National Emergency Authorities Act. And so this is something that people have been talking about for a few years, declaring a climate emergency in order to unlock some additional executive power. And, I have thought this is a climate emergency for some time, believe me, but when Donald Trump was in the White House, I did not want to give him any more emergency authority. And you can sort of imagine how he would abuse something like, a climate emergency that unlocks other authorities. Biden, I feel very comfortable, would not abuse that power and would put it to work in service of doing some really important things. I mean, with that additional authority, I think big decisions by his administration could better withstand legal challenge. It just is a better posture to fend off all of these lawsuits that are going to be coming from the fossil fuel industry. And there's a bunch of other ways where invoking those emergency authorities could help him, really push climate pollution reduction across the federal government.
That's great. Thank you. So, and the final sort of basic question is, what happened in Glasgow at the summit? And we'll put it in some way, by the glass half full or half empty. And you had a lot to say. We've seen your remarks, so we're eager to hear you in person on this subject.
Yeah, I always want to. I always want to offer some hope and optimism to folks on this subject because, despair is always just right there. But, I don't want to bullshit you. So the truth is, the glass is at least half empty. We are making progress. We obviously brought a bunch of countries together on an agreement to reduce methane. That's very important. We are trying to lead in a way that's hugely better than what it's been in the last 4 years. We're, I think, being welcomed back by the world community, and the world is really gratified to see this leadership, but they're not sure it's going to last. And China and Russia and Saudi Arabia and others are far from doing what we need them to do to actually hold global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So we've got this decade. That was what Glasgow was all about, was keeping 1.5 degrees within reach at the, through actions that we will take this decade. This is the decade of action. And I don't think we produced enough action in Glasgow. But, maybe the most important thing to come from it is we're going to have another summit this year. We're not going to wait more than that. We're going to start really ratcheting up the pressure. And that is very important. So, we've got this year, I think, here in the United States to really deliver some action and some leadership so that when we go back, I think it's in Egypt at the end of this year. It's in Cairo. So I'll get to check that off my travel bucket list, I suppose. But we need to take with us, much more tangible action than the kind of hope we were peddling in Glasgow.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Jared. This is, and so we're now going to turn to questions from those who are present today. And Bill, would you start out with begin with the questions that you compiled? Thank you.
Yeah, good morning. Hi, Jared. So I think one that came in prior is how do we get Republicans to see the seriousness of climate change and the solutions that are readily available? How can we message more effectively?
So I will be pretty painfully blunt in responding to that question. My suggestion: stop trying. It's pointless. It is a nostalgic ideal that we're going to somehow bring these Republicans along, and that we'll all lock arms and in a bipartisan way tackle this climate crisis. I hate to be so cynical, but really what I'm being is realistic because it's just not going to happen, and we don't have time to keep pursuing it. When I talk to my daughter decades from now about what I did during the decade of action, I don't want to say I kept courting these Republicans that were just always out of reach because I really wanted this notion of bipartisanship, and I lost sight of the fact. If you've seen the movie Don't Look Up, the comet was hurtling to the planet. So
Yeah.
I guess my sorry to be so cynical, but my answer is forget about partisanship or bipartisanship. It doesn't matter. We've got a comet hurtling at the planet. Let's focus on the stuff we need to do.
Yeah.
And if they come along, that's great. I would love that. Believe me, I really like to work across the aisle and I have good relationships, but we don't have time to just keep pursuing bipartisanship for the sake of bipartisanship.
Okay.
Okay, well, I do have kind of a follow-up on that that came in, which is, have you reached out to moderate Republicans using a carbon price as an olive branch and as a source of funding to keep business taxes from rising?
Yes, tried it for years. It's not going to work. Not going to work. We got to move on.
Okay.
Is that true? Do you feel that's true, that even if you go for a carbon price piece of the legislation to accompany what we've already been talking about,
Yeah.
Jack Arnew, is that in the cards now, do you think?
Look, I'm sure that the best of intentions are behind that notion, that idea. It has been tried earnestly for years and years and years, and the whole time that it has been tried, we've been losing ground with Republicans. So I just think we got to be clear-eyed about what's going on, and I think the continued pursuit of that kind of becomes this ideal of bipartisanship that begins to lose sight of the problem we're trying to solve. It's not, we're going backward when it comes to courting the Republicans that used to say they supported that bill. Most of them are gone.
Mhm.
They were thrown out by their own party. And, these were people that I liked and worked with. So again, I think we've just got to fixate a lot less on persuading Republicans and being bipartisan and all of that. These are very divided partisan times. And I think we will be most effective if we throw out party labels and partisanship altogether and just focus on what's going to work in stopping this comet that is hurtling towards our planet.
Okay. Well, I've got one more along these lines, which is kind of a last gasp question. Is there a single Republican senator who could be persuaded to vote for Build Back Better?
No.
Okay. So
I just want to throw one thing into that. I guess it's too much with the minimal time we have for you to say why there is not a single senator, a single Republican senator.
Well, because remember, Build Back Better includes more than just the climate piece.
Oh yeah.
It includes child tax credits. It includes universal pre-K and investments in affordable housing and all kinds of things. And even Republicans that we think of as maybe in reach on climate. I mean, I don't know who that would be, really. They're not champions, but maybe the Mitt Romneys or the Lisa Murkowskis as she builds her LNG facility. Some might deem them, potential partners on climate. I don't really think they are. I think all of them, in one degree or another, are completely under the thumb of the fossil fuel industry. But even if you could peel off one or two of them, the other things in Build Back Better are going to spook them. They're just not going to go there. So I think our best hope on Build Back Better, it continues to be holding together this package of investments that is more than just climate. Because I think if we start trading away, investments in affordable housing, investments in childcare and family leave and all kinds of other things in order to get the piece we want, you could potentially create a backlash that just blows the whole thing up. So my view is we try to get as much as we possibly can. Some of it is obviously going to fall out, but I think the climate piece has a good chance of staying in together with some really important social investments. And then that package as a whole is our best way forward.
Okay, and then switching back to the infrastructure bill itself, is there a way to focus more of the hard infrastructure dollars on climate mitigation as opposed to adaptation?
Some of it will lend itself pretty nicely. I mean, here's the thing: we're going to have a shiny new electricity grid with new transmission and investments in research and other things. Now, whether that carries clean or dirty electrons is another matter. So that's where we took a step backward with losing the Clean Electricity Performance Program. We were going to put all of this money that is now law into grid modernization, and we were going to have this powerful new incentive to make sure that it was clean electrons moving on the grid. In place of that, we've stitched together some other incentives. The Biden administration is doing a rulemaking that could put some additional leverage into the power sector. So we will try to make all that happen. The market itself is moving towards clean energy, just not fast enough. But that's our challenge. We'll have a grid that is capable of supporting the transition to electric vehicles, and we'll support clean energy nicely if we can quickly deliver more of that clean energy.
Okay, I want to honor one that came in prior, which is, and this is a little bit different question. With plastic now expected to outpace the greenhouse gas emissions from coal by 2030, what can be done to help pass the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act?
Yeah, that's really important stuff. It's going to be tough at the federal level unless we somehow win a few Senate seats and change the rules and get rid of the filibuster. We could pass lots of these things out of the House of Representatives because we operate on a majority vote basis. But until we get rid of the filibuster, unfortunately, you're left with a set of less than optimal tools. You're left with what can the EPA and other agencies do under existing authority. And I'm sure there's some more that they could do there. But really, I think states and local governments have the opportunity to fill a lot of the void on stuff like plastics. California's done a great job, and hopefully will continue to lead.
And we have another specific question on offshore wind. Infrastructure for offshore wind will be expensive. How might federal funding help prepare for it? Or is it too early to know?
Well, no, I think we've got to do everything we can to make offshore wind a success. We had some good news this week. The Biden administration announced the largest lease sale for offshore wind. And they say like in U.S. history, but the truth is we've done hardly any offshore wind in U.S. history. So even a small lease sale would be like the largest in history. And you could really mislead folks about that. But it is big. It is big. It is the entire New York Bight. It will be enough to power, I think a couple million homes. So there's a lot of clean energy potential there. And we hope that in my district, the Humboldt County offshore wind project is not far behind. It'll come in a phased way. The first phase will, deliver a lot of clean energy, but not anything on that scale. And then if it proves up, and if we can get the transmission upgrades online to support more, there's a second phase that could, power a lot of our needs here in California. So we got to find a way to say yes to these projects. That doesn't mean you build them in a haphazard or reckless way. You got to engage the fishing community. You got to be thoughtful about siting and other things. But we have to get to yes on offshore wind as quickly as possible. And I think the administration's doing a pretty good job on that.
Okay, and getting a lot of votes here for another political question. How can we help with Manchin? How can we help? Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, Joe Manchin is a real black box. I think I guess I would suggest urge all of the other senators you can to get this done with Manchin. I don't know that all of us leaning on Manchin is necessarily going to be very effective, but I think trying to make sure that every single one of his Democratic colleagues in the Senate is leaning on him in whatever way they think is the most effective is probably the way to go. And make sure that the Biden administration is leaning on him. He is, I mean, I can't remember a time other than when, John McCain famously did this at the last second, when a single U.S. senator held so much power over something so big and important. But that's where we are. We just got to find a way to get him on board.
Okay, and bringing equity into the picture, does Build Back Better include incentives for multifamily property owners to install EV infrastructure for tenants?
I don't know that it's anything that specific, but I obviously, support that. And I think that a lot of the infrastructure funding that will come down through both Build Back Better and the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act could be applied to that kind of program if that's how we want to set it up in Marin and in other parts of California.
Drawing on your experience in a former life as a state assembly person, a question comes in: once state allocations are determined for the infrastructure law, who do we reach out to in order to try and influence how the California share gets spent?
Yeah, so I think your regional transportation plans are going to be very important.
Mhm.
I think it's sort of on a program by program basis. Some of these things are going to have some direct funding that could come straight to local government. Others are going to flow through the state, and so I think I can't really categorically answer that question. We're going to have to look at the individual programs and some of these formula announcements that are going to start to come out in the days ahead. But we should, my office can get you as much information as we have on that. And then I think it's great that MCL wants to engage on making that spending as green as possible and as equitable as
Yeah.
possible. Because remember, the goal here is to try to make sure that 40% of the spending is flowing through to disadvantaged frontline communities that have borne the impacts of climate change. That's really important.
Okay, and then also on a local level, Bell mentioned the House Select Committee on the Climate Crisis that you served on, and the review that MCL was involved in of that as well. That led to a lot of success, things that were included in Build Back Better, for instance. But how can local climate change agencies and advocates like us engage with that committee's work and help implement its recommendations on things like agriculture and wildlands and all the other good stuff that was in there?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So the select committee put out about a 500-page climate action plan last year. I think it was, well, sorry, we're in 2022 now. So yeah, I guess it was the year before last year. And I would commend that to those of you that want to do the deep dive. In some ways, it's very visionary and comprehensive. It really does try to look at everything. But in some ways, folks in Marin are ahead of some of the recommendations in that action plan, because this is what we thought we could recommend, at the congressional level. And I think in Marin we can push the envelope even more. So I would take a look at that. Don't feel constrained by it. But if it gives you ideas on things that can be put to work at the local level, that'd be great. yeah, but my guess is on things like agriculture and all sorts of other things, there is already a higher bar here in our local community than what you would even see in that report.
Okay, and another one on EV infrastructure. Where are we with the infrastructure law in terms of getting universal EV charging stations?
A long way to go. I know we got some clean car champions here in this group. I see Carlene and Laurie and others. This is maybe the most important thing any of us can be doing. And I just think we've got to create as much momentum and action for this as possible. So the funding in the bill that has become law, $7.5 billion, is not nearly enough to create a national EV charging network. It'll help some. But I think we've got the Build Back Better would round things out really nicely, would include some tax incentives that would be super helpful for EVs and infrastructure. Everything you can do. I mean, pressuring as consumers, as shareholders, as community activists, trying to get these internal combustion vehicles off the road, I believe, is the most important climate action we can all take.
Do you think there's any chance that if Build Back Better gets weaker on its climate provisions, there'll be separate legislation on climate?
If it gets weaker?
Well, I mean, if Build Back Better, if a lot of compromises have to be made, or if it doesn't pass, I mean, if there's something like that happens, do you think there'll be separate legislation put forward, or is it possible to have separate legislation just on the climate part of it?
Yeah, I would hate to see it as just a standalone again, because I think that could create a real backlash with some members of Congress who, are passionate about affordable housing or childcare or other things that are currently in Build Back Better. They might see that as a selling out by, the environmental elites or something like that, and that's why I've been really careful not to suggest that we jettison any of those things. There definitely is some activity in the Senate, horse trading about, what pieces can hold together, what pieces can go as separate legislation. I think the child tax credit is in real trouble. And it's too bad because, from a anti-poverty perspective and a social justice perspective, it's one of the most powerful ways we have of lifting struggling families and kids out of poverty. But it's not well understood. If you poll it, it's not even very popular because a lot of people don't know what it does. A lot of people don't have kids and so aren't eligible for it. So the politics of holding on to that are not very promising. So, I really want to see that happen, but I worry that it might fall out. Family leave was always really tenuous, but, we've got that in a lot of states and we will keep working on it. We'll have more chances to enact universal family leave in this country. If you pair those things out, that might be a deal that Joe Manchin could accept, but that's all happening behind closed doors in the Senate right now.
Yeah.
So one really big question that came in early, I think originally from Doug Wilson, can effective climate action survive the attack on our democracy? And what can we each do to stop that attack?
Well, a super thoughtful question from a very thoughtful guy. Hello, Doug. Great to see you. One of my favorite people. Been working with him since the dawn of time. I don't know. I mean, I'm sorry to keep coming back to this goofy Netflix movie that I watched the other night, the Don't Look Up thing, but it's just it's sort of the frame that I keep thinking about things in right now. Will we get distracted? I feel like we're pretty well moving past the point of denial about the climate crisis. I mean, even some of the most hardened deniers that I work with in Congress have stopped, for the most part, full-throated climate denial. They have a more nuanced climate denial rhetoric these days. But in terms of actually doing anything, even folks you would expect to be on board are just so easily distracted. And boy, what a distraction the January 6th stuff and the insurrectionists and Trump 2.0 and all these things are going to be. Can the kind of climate action that we need withstand all of those distractions in a country that is divided and where so many people have figured out how to make their money by sowing those divisions? I don't know. I'm not going to give up. We can't give up. That's never an option on these things because the stakes are way too high. But we are up against some really awful forces of distraction that are going to complicate our work.
Yeah.
Okay, and then maybe just one other question. I know we're nearing your time. So let's see, my screen just shifted. Do you have any last thoughts to share on, sort of your year in review and working through all this stuff and immediate goals in the next couple of months moving forward?
Yeah, sure, Bill. I've been thinking about that a lot. And I guess what I would suggest in these tribal political times that we're in, and I've had a bunch of questions about that I think come from a longing or a nostalgia for more bipartisanship and just better governing. That is all something that I share in theory, at least. But to me, if we're really going to focus in on this climate crisis and just stop getting pulled and pushed by partisan tribal politics, I've got to be honest with my fellow Democrats too. And the truth is, in 2021, as thrilled as I was to put the White House in Joe Biden's hands and have at least a nominally Democratic Senate and hang on to our House majority, there was way too much fossil fuel business as usual in 2021 if we're serious about this climate crisis. Mm-hmm. And we can give the gauzy, biggest offshore wind sale in history, kind of talking points. But we also issued one of the biggest oil and gas leases in history in the Gulf of Mexico. It's a huge carbon bomb. It shouldn't have happened. There's any number of other ways in which we capitulated to the fossil fuel interests. We continue to build out fossil fuel infrastructure. And I think we've passed a point where we can accept that and, just keep spouting talking points about all the good things we're doing. It's not good enough. And I have to be honest with this administration, which I love and I support, but they're not doing enough. And our Congress is not doing enough. Our country's not doing enough. And that's the challenge that I see. I take away from 2021, sure, some progress, pat myself on the back for passing some good bills out of the House. It's not enough. It's not enough. So that's our challenge. We got to stay motivated. We've got to work together functionally. This is a team sport, but we can't rest on it. We don't have any laurels to rest on. We've just got a hell of a lot more work to do.
Okay, well, thank you for answering a series of, I think, really good questions that came in. I really appreciate all the questions, and we'll get the ones that didn't get asked to you. So maybe you can consider, answering them in other forms. So thank you very much. I want to turn this back over to Belle and to Bob.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Well, thank you, Jared. Thank you so much. And I think that we will continue to be in touch and all of us trying to figure out ways to be most effective and helpful in part to you, because you have a strong voice in this, and also in any ways that you can think of that you could draw us in or give us an advance notice where we might be able to work with you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, sir.
Okay. Well, that was very fruitful, very good. And I think we're going to take some time now to kind of debrief and talk about what we learned and open it up now to your questions. If you could, are we gonna, I guess we're gonna, Bob, are you gonna take it over now and tell us how we can have a conversation about what we learned and what we think we might be able to do?
Yeah. So I think people will be unmuted.
You're muted.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think people will be unmuted now. And what I'm asking folks to do is to raise your hand, and you can also put questions in chat. And I'll respond to hand raising in the order in which the hands were raised. And but I would like to say that Congressman Huffman has provided terrific leadership, and we really are so lucky to have him. Carlene?
Yes, hi. Thanks for arranging this. Really appreciate it. I just want to make a comment when we think about things we can do. And Congressman Huffman, doesn't mention this because he's in this group, but he does have a clean pack. And that's, if you're able to, it'd be great to give donations to that. It's a pack that he has that he basically takes the funding and uses it to help others get elected that are climate oriented. So I just wanted to share that.
Okay, well, this is an inquisitive bunch, so other hands raised.
David.
David.
Unmute. Hi, everyone. Thanks. First of all, thanks for setting up this program today. That was terrific. I think we all get opportunities to, hear Congressman Huffman speak, but rarely with such a sharp focus, without a bunch of other people in the audience wanting to talk about all their particular issues of concern. So thanks for that. One thing I heard that I thought was really important, and I just want to emphasize it, is sort of that general question of how can we help with Senator Manchin. And I think, frankly, that question applies to lots of the things that the congressman said. I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to do that. And at least what I took away as his answer to that, specifically around Manchin, was I wrote down 2 notes: urge all Democratic senators to get this done with Manchin, and to urge the Biden administration to lean on Manchin. And it really struck me, one of the things that we all have going for us is we're in a political environment where our elected leaders for our local community, even up to the state, are pretty aligned with what we on this call are trying to accomplish. But I think this idea of really expanding individually and organizationally our reach to perhaps all Democratic senators, and more broadly in the Biden administration, that theme of it's time to get angry about climate change. And it really struck a chord with me when he said that. So I just wanted to emphasize that particular angle, that we're all working, I think, locally, but I think we need to spread our individual and group actions to that broader group. Like he said, probably forget the Republicans, just forget them. They're not going to change. They're not going to come around. Don't waste our time on them. But let's really get angry and start pushing on the broader Democratic caucus, especially the senators in the Biden administration.
Bob, I just want to ask David a question. Do you feel that's true locally too? I mean, I don't think we should give up on moderate Republicans locally.
No. And I think, Bill, I would, and I'm just reflecting what the congressman said.
Yeah.
But no, since the partisan labels don't come in such big time in our local politics, I would certainly say no. I mean, we don't run our council elections on a partisan basis, even, at the county level. So I think at a local level, not so much. Certainly at state, there's probably some people that can come around, but I just really heard a very clear message. Don't waste your time. We don't have much time. We don't have enough energy. Let's focus it all and get mad and make something happen.
Yeah. That's great.
Kevin Morrison.
Thank you. My question is kind of a perfect follow-on to what you were just saying, and it's a question and an observation. Tom Flynn in chat wrote, how can we work with Senator McGuire, Mark Levine, and the candidates for his office to make Northwestern California a model for successful, effective climate action? That's a great question, and that's what both of you were just talking about. And, I see Ms. Terry Green in the audience here, and she and I have talked recently about how Marin County is allocating funds to Marin coming from ARPA and doing some environmental mitigation mostly, or adaptation mostly. But we have trouble prioritizing things in Marin. So I'm hopeful that part of what will come from this gathering is an ability to speak with one voice about prioritizing things in Marin County. So cheers on that.
Great. Nadine?
Hi. Yeah, kind of in the same political arena that we're discussing right now. I know that the senators such as Amy Klobuchar, et cetera, have been putting pressure on Manchin and have been working with him. Certainly his suggestion to keep doing whatever we can to encourage that is good. And of course, trying to keep Feinstein strong, is good. But I want to move it out even a little bit further into the future. The Senate, I haven't followed it, but I just know everybody's saying it was, we're likely to be worse off in the Senate in the next election. I think we have to think about our members either joining groups separately or else our groups doing, phone bank and outreach and postcard to try to surpass what we've got in the Senate right now. Because if we, I don't know, maybe Manchin State's going to go Republican next year. Maybe they'll just not even put him in. But I know that this group focuses on local and climate, but I think this could all go down badly this time around. And I think we really have to start making the donations, laying the infrastructure, participating with other groups that are doing, like Mark Kelly. I don't know how strong he is on climate. Do we know? But there's senators who are vulnerable and unlikely to lose. And I hope that some of the members of this group will join other groups. And of course, I know a lot of them, if you don't want suggestions, who are, would be working on the electoral side. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks. Ken?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on this point about working with our senators to put pressure on Manchin. And I think what I'm hearing Jared Huffman say is that we need to encourage our senators to figure out whatever it is Manchin needs in order to be able to pass Build Back Better with the climate provisions in it. And we all have other issues that are in there. We'd all like all of it, but I think it's almost like saying to Feinstein, hey, we really want to make sure that these climate provisions pass. And so we want Build Back Better to pass. And so pretty much whatever he'll agree with, we support.
Hello?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Well, hi, Mary. Thanks for calling back.
Thank you.
Doug, you better mute. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So Ken, you're done with your question?
I am.
Okay. Do we have any more questions? Lori?
Hi. Wow, that was really sobering from Jared. I thought he was very honest with us, and it leads me to believe that the chances of getting much done in Congress in this year are pretty slim, notwithstanding Build Back Better. And it made me think about two different things, both points that sort of come up. I just wanted to reiterate them, which is on one level, I think we should really be focusing on holding the Democratic majority in the House and improving it in the Senate if that's possible, and focusing on voting rights at the federal level in terms of legislative congressional action. So that's one thing. And then it made me realize how important it is for us to do things here in Marin and make sure that we are a shining beacon of what is the best that can be done. And that gets me to specifically the money, the ARPA money that the supervisors approved, I don't know, a couple of meetings ago about for climate, both on mitigation and adaptation, excuse me. And they put more money into adaptation than they did into mitigation, which I think is the wrong way to go. Bill Carney mentioned this at the meeting when the supervisors approved it. And I think one of the things that we should be doing is, it's not a lot of money and it's over 3 to 4 years, I believe, but I think we should, with many voices, urge the supervisors to spend more money on mitigation now and put that into some precedent-setting projects.
Thanks, Lori. Carlene, you're on mute.
Yeah, I also just want to mention, I know we're very focused on the legislation, but our agencies, local agencies and state agencies hold a huge amount of control, and they're not always efficient or spending the money how we would like them to. So I think that we have a huge opportunity collectively to really influence local and state agencies. So just wanted to put that out there as an action potential.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks. Bob Archer.
Thank you, Bob. My video's on the fritz. I'm remain concerned about the very negative approach to bipartisanship. In the Senate, there's a discussion going on about creating a separate climate bill and a separate social bill. And there are serious trade-offs on doing that. But there are clearly Republicans who would support many of the climate provisions, such as research and development, Murkowski, Romney, Brown of Indiana, and others. So if that became the priority and became the reconciliation approach, you could bypass Manchin. So that's part of the discussion going on. And I think the dismissive approach to trying to find bipartisan actions to be taken is a mistake, given how they have played a role in the passage historically of solar, wind, and energy efficiency programs.
Great.
May I ask you a question, Bob? And that's, there was some talk maybe last month about how, carbon pricing, putting a price on carbon could now be part of the answer, or at least could be taken into account now that the electricity portion has to be substituted by other things. Have you got any thoughts on that?
When you say now that the electricity portion has to be substituted by other things, what do you mean?
I'm just talking about a price on carbon.
In the Senate, there's clearly support in the Senate in the key positions of Wyden at head of the Finance Committee. Biden's key man is fellow senator from Delaware, as well as, of course, Senator Whitehouse and others in the Senate Finance Committee. But it remains an issue, of course. He's got 49 in support of it, according to Senator Whitehouse, and he says the House and the administration are quietly in support of it. But that's where it resides, along with everything else.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Too many Bobs around. Sorry, Bill. Any other questions?
Yeah.
I would like to make a comment that I do think that Tom Flynn's question that he put in chat around 9:30 is a great one. I just want to repeat it. He said, how can we work with with you, State Senator Mike McGuire, Mark Levine, and the candidates for his office to make Northwestern California a model for successful, effective climate action. And I know that resonated with, I believe, David Mueller, Kevin Morrison, Lori Mott. I do think that we're going to have to really, and with Doug Wilson, and we are going to have to make that, do a lot more thinking about that in order to be the model that Marin can be for elsewhere. I see that Rick Holland has his hand up. Rick?
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to follow up after Bob and actually ask the committee too. This is my first meeting here with the MCL Climate Action Committee. But what of the feasibility of a carbon tax for Marin County? Could we do it just for the county or possibly with some adjoining counties similar to MCE?
Is there anyone here from the county government who wants to handle that question?
I want to talk to Bob Archer about that. Rick?
Well, it really works at the national level because of border issues and cost issues. I do not recommend doing it. You see the problems of state level carbon pricing issues are so protected by various subsidies and free allowances and the like that I just don't think it's a good idea to pursue it at that level.
I would just say you'd run into problems with the Interstate Commerce Act if you tried to do it on a local or state level.
You cannot do a border adjustment. That was my basic question. I think that's an issue that has to occur at the national level.
Okay, so I don't see any more questions, so I suggest, folks, that we move on to the rest of the agenda. The next two items, Ken Strong is going to take the lead. And the first of those two items is his discussing the February 18th COG lead topic, building electrification. Ken?
Yeah, we're going to, on February 18th, the focus of the discussion is going to be on building electrification, decarbonization from a building decarbonization from a policy perspective. And in that, I think what we're going to try and do is talk about what other local jurisdictions around the Bay Area and California are doing in the way of passing ordinances or developing policies to promote building decarbonization. Then we're going to focus in on what Marin County is doing, because Marin County, under its climate action plan, is supposed to enact a countywide electrification ordinance that would take effect no later than January 1st of 2023. There currently are efforts at the county to start working on this. And so we want to talk about what those, find out what those efforts are and talk about them and see where they're going. And then I think we want to talk about, and then we're going to talk about as a group, what we can do to bring our individual jurisdictions along. Because we all know that a policy that would, for example, affect building codes would be a whole lot more palatable to the building community and more effective if all of the jurisdictions worked on, came up with the same ordinance and the like. So that's what the meeting is going to be focused on, and there'll be more information about who's going to be speaking and the like coming up.
Okay, great. So let's get to the second item that you're going to be leading, and this will be longer. It's on the net energy metering 3.0 proceeding of the California Public Utility Commission. And here you go. Take it away, Ken.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. So Bob asked me to provide an update on what's going on with this, the net energy metering 3.0 and its impact on solar. We talked about this a little bit last month, but so some of this may be repetitive, but I wanted to kind of go through this for everybody. So what net energy metering is, it's the program under the California Public Utilities Commission rate structure, whereby people who have rooftop solar can get compensated for the electrons they send out to the grid in excess of what they use for their own personal use. And there is a belief that the current program is unfair, and the legislature asked the Public Utilities Commission to take a look at it. Now, first of all, where things are in process. So the California Public Utilities Commission issued a proposed decision December 13th. The parties to that proceeding, which are like formal parties to the law, it's almost like a lawsuit, if you will, they filed opening comments last week, and today are going to file reply comments. The Public Utilities Commission is currently scheduled to vote on this January 27th. They don't have to vote by that date. They can postpone it and the like. And there is some thought that there's going to be an alternative proposed decision that's going to come out. But that's the current schedule as far as where things are. So you can have that in mind from as to what we can do. So what are the reasons for the proposed decision? So there is the current program is seen as inequitable, shifting costs to low-income ratepayers. And the details of the program are this. First of all, net energy metering, as I said, pays solar owners for the power they sent to the grid at the retail rate currently, some version of the retail rate. But that is much higher than that power is actually worth at some times of the day. We have so much rooftop solar and utility large-scale solar in the state at the moment that at certain times of the day, solar power is actually worth zero and needs to be curtailed. And yet, under NEM, the individual rooftop solar owners who send their electrons out to the grid get reimbursed for that at the retail rate. So that's perceived as unfair because other ratepayers who don't have solar have to help pay for that money being sent to the solar owners. Critics also claim that since solar owners buy less power from the grid, they don't pay their fair share of cost to maintain the grid, which furthers this inequity. So those are the reasons that the CPUC looked at this. Now, under the proceeding, there were two things they were supposed to come up with: a new NEM program that doesn't shift costs, and one that also promotes a sustainable solar industry. And how they did that is a subject of a lot of controversy. So the program they put together was, first of all, they're going to shift the amount solar customers are paid to a much lower rate for the electrons they send to the grid, about 80% less. They're going to use something which is called the avoided cost calculator, which is really complicated. There's a big debate as to whether it accurately captures the value of solar, but in any event, it's significantly lower than the retail rate. Existing solar owners, NEM customers 1.0 and 2.0, as they're called, they must switch to this new lower rate 15 years after their system was installed. Under the existing programs, people who installed solar were promised that they would be able to operate under that NEM rate for 20 years because it was calculated that was the amount of time it would take solar owners to be able to pay back their investment in order to be encouraged to make the significant upfront investment that solar is. This is now going to be reduced to 15 years from when your system is installed. A third component of the new NEM decision is what's called a grid participation charge. And this focuses on that other supposed inequity of existing NEM, with this argument that somehow solar owners aren't paying their fair share of cost to maintain the grid. And the way the CPUC decided to address this is they're going to charge $8 per kilowatt of the installed solar system per month. So everybody certainly everybody who has who does a new solar installation, it's a little vague as to whether this applies to existing solar customers. But any new solar customer is going to pay on average about $40 a month for just having solar. And this applies no matter whether you use any power that month or not. You could go on vacation and not use any solar at all. You'd still pay your $40 a month grid participation charge. And then the fourth component of the proposed decision is something which kind of is called a market transition credit. And this is supposed to be some financial incentives to promote solar plus storage, because everybody seems to think we need to start pairing solar plus storage in order to have a grid of the future with local distributed energy resources. So those are the components of the decision. So who's affected by this decision? So it as proposed, it applies to residential solar customers. It doesn't apply to commercial solar customers because the CPUC thinks they're paying their fair share through some things like standby charges and the like. It doesn't apply to customers of public utility districts, such as the Sacramento Municipal Utility District, LADWP, entities that aren't regulated by the CPUC. And the NEM rate doesn't apply to CCA customers, such as those of MCE, who are empowered to set their own NEM rates. But I would caution that I think it's very likely that local CCAs like MCE will mirror the NEM rates that the CPUC agrees to, or something close to it, because if they don't, all those solar customers out there who now are customers of the utilities, they will migrate to the better rates at the CCAs. And because they're money losers during the middle of the day when they have to pay retail prices for solar that is worth nothing, that would be a difficult financial hit for a number of the CCAs. So although not strictly, the proposed decision doesn't strictly apply to them, I think they'll probably follow whatever comes out of it. So then if you look at what people are saying about the proposed decision, I've kind of aggregated some of the comments that are made by various interest groups, if you will, that are out there that are looking at this. And I kind of focused on a couple of different segments. There are the public advocate segments. Then there's the Sierra Club, a couple of CCAs and solar interests. And then there's PG&E, San Diego Gas and Electric, and SCE, the three big investor-owned utilities. So as far as the public advocate groups, so there are two of them. There's TURN, the Utility Reform Network, and the Office of Public Advocates. TURN is a nonprofit whose focus is on advocating in favor of ratepayers, and they generally are anti the investor-owned utilities, or at least they're frequent critics of what they're up to in trying to improve how much we pay for electric rates. And then the Office of Public Advocates is actually a separate office within the California Public Utilities Commission, paid for as part of their budget, whose mission is to advocate in favor of the general public ratepayers. So both TURN and the Office of Public Advocates agree with the new reduced compensation rate, reducing things down to by 80%. to a rate based on the avoided cost calculator as opposed to retail rates because of the cost shift. They also think there should be some grid participation charge, but Turn says it should be based on the portion of solar generation that a solar customer uses on site, and because that's more accurately reflects what supposedly they're not paying to support the grid. Public Advocates wants the legacy period, this what has been 20, but is the PD is going to reduce to 15. They want that reduced to 7 years because they think most solar customers pay off the value of their solar system under the current NEM programs within 7 years. Both of them really focus on, though, the fact that electric rates are overall too high in this state, which is going to inhibit people's willingness to shift to electric utilities, to go electric. And they say that there are a number of costs such as wildfire prevention costs and subsidies for EVs and heat pumps, that shouldn't be part of the general rate base, but that in fact should be general fund expenditures. In the past, some of these things have been easier to just put in the general rate base than for the legislature to raise taxes to pay for. So these entities are saying we need to take some of these costs out of the general rate base and put them as part of the general budget. The Sierra Club, East Bay Clean Energy, and the solar interests say that they focus on the grid participation charge, the $8 charge, and they say it's illegal and discriminatory. First of all, they assert that under the federal law, you can't have a rate that discriminates against similarly situated ratepayers. Which this would do, singling out solar customers as opposed to others. Under this proposal, if one of us goes out and puts energy efficiency in our homes and reduces our use of electricity, we wouldn't pay this charge, even though theoretically we're now paying less to support the grid. In fact, a new solar customer could put solar on his roof, and then after that go out, install EV chargers, two EV chargers because they bought two electric vehicles and they electrified all their appliances. They might end up having almost the same electric use of electricity from the grid as they did before they put solar, but they would still have to pay this $8 per kilowatt charge. So they say this is unfair and discriminatory. However, there are some charges that NEM customers don't pay, such as they don't pay to support the wildfire fund component of bills. And Sierra Club and EBC say, yes, NEM customers should be paying these costs if all other ratepayers are. This should be a fixed part of the bill. And they also all say that the portions of the proposed decision which are supposed to stimulate solar plus storage will not work, and thus won't ensure a sustainable solar industry. Different folks talk about what the impact of this proposed decision will be on the solar industry, but a lot of people think it would significantly negatively impact the solar industry. Then finally, we have PGE, SE, and San Diego Gas and Electric. They don't think the proposed decision goes far enough. They say that NEM 2.0 customers shouldn't get any grandfathering. They ought to immediately go to the new rate because there will still be an inequitable cost shift. They think the grid participation charge should be higher than the $8 per kilowatt. That it ought to be roughly double of that to cover all generation-related costs they say are being shifted now. So they think there ought to be about an $80 a month charge for solar. And then finally, there's a provision in the bill or in the proposed decision, which would allow customers to upsize their solar to 150% of their current electric needs. And the utilities say they shouldn't people shouldn't be permitted to do that, that somehow that would turn people into generators and that there would be potential federal tax implications of you'd have to pay federal taxes on the money you got for your solar for the electrons that were sold to the grid. So, so they don't think this is at all good. So where do things stand right now? So Governor Newsom in a press conference this week said he just read the proposed decision, and he'll say we have some work to do. He said, do I think changes need to be made? Yes, I do. There's a lot of rumors circulating. There's an alternate proposed decision under consideration. If people want to comment on this decision, the provision on the CPUC website for public comments on the NEM decision is still up and active, and I think it should be up until the 27th. I've got the link here. I'll put it in the chat so that people can, who want to make that comment can do so. And that's what I have to say about the NEM program. So.
Great. Thanks so much, Ken. And thank you for the time and effort that went into this and everything else you're doing. This is a great presentation.
Can we ask questions about that or not?
Yeah, we're definitely going to have questions, but we need to have questions.
Okay.
So
I'm on an iPad and it's hard for me to use the chat. Can I just, when questions come up, can I just, raise my hand digitally?
I'm sorry, Nadine.
Oh, I said, can our questions just be verbal?
Yeah.
Okay, so are you calling on me or on somebody else?
Yes, go ahead, Nadine.
Okay, well, I had gotten an email about this and I have it on my to-do list, and I was going to call Governor Newsom and oppose the proposal. And because to me, it seemed like it was, stifling solar when we need to encourage solar. But now that you've explained it so completely and thoroughly, first of all, is calling Governor Newsom the thing to do is it should be comments with the CPUC that's more important. And secondly, does it make no sense to just say no to one thing? Should we be saying yes to one of the alternates? It's a little confused. It's more nuanced now. Those are my questions.
It is complicated and nuanced. There's no question about that. Now, my understanding is there have been thousands of phone calls to Governor Newsom's office about this already. I was hearing yesterday that there were demonstrations in both San Francisco and in LA around in front of the CPUC about it. I just stuck the public comments link into the website. I don't know what good it does to make comments to the Public Utility Commission or to in this public comment thing, but I think the sheer volume of comments is significant. So I would urge people who are concerned about this to make a comment on the website, even if it's just urging them to come up with, to think this thing through more thoroughly, come up with an alternate proposed decision, something of that. If you have specific concerns about the details of it, then you can obviously put those in. But both calling the governor's office and putting a comment in there is helpful. As Peter Schwartz notes, the CPUC is a quasi-independent agency, and so they don't have to take direction from the governor. So,
Pamela?
Hi. Question about the wildfire funds you had on a couple of your slides. Are you referring to a different wildfire funds that they have separately from the Marin County MWPA funds?
yes.
Okay. And do you know how much money we're talking about, or percentage, or what does it cost to an average homeowner for that? Or is it based on use or something?
It's a separate line item on your bill, I think. If you looked at your electric bill, it would tell you what it is. It's a charge to help fund the cost of reducing vegetation, protecting utility lines throughout the state. So it's
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's hear from David Muller.
Thank you. Well, first of all, Ken, I really want to thank you for putting this presentation together. I've been following this issue for some time, and this is the first and only presentation I have ever heard on NIMS 3.0 that gave what sounded like a balanced and thoughtful, straightforward, no spin presentation of all the different views. And I've just never heard that. Usually we're hearing from one advocacy group or the other, and of course they spin the information to support their views. So I found this extremely helpful. And I had one clarification question. You can either put up the slide again or perhaps just answer it. One of the slides of one of the three groups supporting or commenting on this, three main groups, I think their proposal is that the grid support should be based on total consumption. I think that's the way it said. And I just wanted a clarification. Did that mean the total amount of electricity they consumed off the grid? So basically, the more you would use off the grid, you'd pay a higher grid support charge, and less used off the grid, a lower grid support charge. Did I get that right?
Yeah, so Turn says that the grid participation charge should be based only on the portion of solar generation used to serve on-site consumption.
Okay.
So yes, so the more electricity you use from your solar, the higher your grid participation charge would be. Again, based upon the theory that is, I believe that but for your solar, you would be buying that additional electricity from the grid.
Oh, so for clarity, and this is why I was a little confused about it. So it would be based on the amount of solar you used rather than the amount of off-grid consumption you used. So it's based on you'd be having to support the grid to the extent you weren't taking power off the grid rather than the reverse. I think that's what you just said.
Well, a little bit. I mean, see, so as a solar customer, when you turn your lights on at night, you're not, unless you've got a battery, your electricity is coming from the grid.
And you're paying some grid support as part of that charge. I got you. Okay,
exactly.
Great. Thanks for that clarification.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, Susanna? Susanna Saunders?
Sue Sanders.
Sanders, thank you.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. Yes, thank you, Ken. What a wonderful presentation about everything that's going on. And I just want to say I've been very involved with the opposition to this new proposal that would absolutely end the rooftop solar market if adopted. And it would end 70,000 jobs. And part of the huge turnout yesterday in San Francisco was a rally. And a lot of it was the solar workers that are going to lose their jobs. And it absolutely helps to call the governor and ask him to not let this happen. He has a lot of influence over the CPUC. So calling him in opposition to this is really important. The California Energy Commission says we need to triple rooftop solar to meet our 100% renewable by 2045, which is absolutely too late. So we need to be putting solar everywhere, along with PG&E and the other utility solar farms. So for this to go away, to end the rooftop solar market, because it would take the payback period from 7 years to 20. And this is not coming from me, this is coming to one of the premier energy analysts in the country. So it absolutely would decimate the solar market. It would decimate our ability to meet our clean energy goals by 2045, which we need to meet sooner. So I'm going to have a Marin Voice published later today in the IJ that sort of goes over more of my thinking on this, because the concern for equity, in my opinion, is a lie. What this is that PG&E is failing. It's a failing business model. They're losing money. And if people are allowed to keep rooftop solar, they're going to lose even more money. So the cost shift is basically you're saying, it's not equitable because people, it's the wealthy people who can put solar on and the lower income people can't afford it. But actually, the lower income to middle income people are just now starting to be able to get rooftop solar. So it also ignores the social cost, which is that it's lower income communities that bear the brunt of dirty energy. The oil and gas wells and fracking are all in low income neighborhoods. So if the CPUC and the utilities were really concerned about equity, they would be promoting, they would be putting rooftop solar everywhere so we can get off this dirty energy. So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there. It is a really complicated issue, but basically if this is adopted, it would kill the rooftop solar market and our clean energy goals would go out the window. And it is definitely about the utilities needing to keep their profits. It's not about concerns about equity.
Okay.
In my opinion. So anyway, thank you. And I hope you'll look at my Marin Voice because it goes into more of the arguments in opposition to this proposal.
Okay. So we could have a whole discussion based on your comments, Sue. Let's move on to Dan Sagedin, and then Bob Archer, and then Stuart Siegel.
Hey, Ken, thank you for that great summary. Is there any saving grace? I've heard the proposal does have some incentives for storage. Is there enough there to make there any saving grace there, or is it just not enough to kind of incent a lot of solar plus storage? Is that an override that, oh, there's so much in here for storage that there'll be a bunch of solar plus storage going up, which would be, I think, a good result, but I'm curious if there's anything enough there.
So here's my understanding, and I see Kurt's on the chat, so he may have a better understanding of this, but there's roughly, as I understand it, under this market transition credit, if you are a new solar, or if you add storage, if you have storage that you put in within the first 4 years of this program taking place, you will get a subsidy. I think it's initially $2,500 for your storage, which goes down 25% a year. That doesn't come close. Well, it would take after 4 years, even if you got the first $2,500 subsidy, your $80 or your $40 a month, grid participation charge would cancel out that storage benefit. There is some other money in there to subsidize storage for low income. Yes, there's some things for storage in there. It's just with the other parts of the program, I don't know that it pencils out.
Thank you, Ken.
No.
Bob Archer.
Yeah, thank you, Ken. That's really a very helpful presentation. As your first slide showed, the economics of solar is becoming less and less of value with the midday solar and the shift of the peak to 5 to 9 p.m. and the inequity of the cost shift on middle and lower income households is clearly documented. But I think the good news is this is a policy revision and whether this is the full right response or not will be worked out, but the policy revision and review is really critical, including in the transportation policies, as the state auditor pointed out. But the broader issue, I think, that maybe MCL will think about is the issue Ken raised there, someone had raised in their comments was the issue of all the costs being dumped on the electricity system and not on the budget. And those are issues that our representatives should address. Why is forest fire fighting on our electricity bill? We have last year, $11 billion surplus, $16 billion surplus in the budget this year. These costs have to be moved off. If we are pushing towards all electrification and raising costs of electricity at the same time, that's not going to work very well.
Thanks, Bob. One thing I would just, kind of follow up on your comment, just also when you talk about the legislature needing to do some things, last year there was a bill in the legislature that would have made changes to NEM 3.0 that was put on hold while the CPUC acted. But that legislative vehicle is still there. And so depending upon what the CPUC eventually decides, there will probably be some activity in the legislature to either further revise what the CPUC does or potentially address some of these issues like why there's so many charges in the electric rates that are not related to just providing energy.
Stuart?
Thanks so much. I'm on my phone, so I'm not going to turn my video on. This has been super great, highly informative. And there's a question I want to ask, because we do have rooftop solar and had a very shocking thing occur, and I didn't hear it mentioned at all in this conversation, is this item that's called the Vintage Power Charge Indifference Adjustment. And at the end of the year, a year ago, we got a bill for $1,400. So every month we pay our gas and electricity, comes on a PG&E bill, and part goes to MCE. At the end of the year, it was an extra $1,400. And so I spent some time digging into it, and there's a thing that the CPUC has is it's a methodology for assessing this. And it's basically, if I understood it correctly, is we get charged for the generation of electricity from the conventional utilities that we don't use because we have solar. And so the whole idea was that, if you have solar and you're not having to pull power off the grid, at the end of the year, we got charged for all the power we didn't use, plus the power we generated with our solar. And so it made the investment in the solar, disappear instantaneously. And so I didn't hear that addressed at all. I don't know if that could be explained a bit here, and how that fits into this whole picture that we just heard about.
So, Stuart, there are two things that might be related to what you're talking about. So first of all, what MCE or PG&E, whoever you have your electricity does, is if you've got solar under one of these net energy metering programs, then at the end of the year, they do a true up, which supposedly adjusts how the actual power you took from the grid, how that cost compares with what you got credited back for the electrons you sold to the grid. So there is a true up process that takes place. But the other thing there's something called the power charge indifference adjustment. And I don't know whether you're talking about that. That shows up on your monthly bill. And that applies to people who are with MCE, who are no longer with PG&E, or if you're with another CCA. And what that does is that seeks to recover the cost of generation contracts that were entered into many years ago at the direction of the CPUC, on the expectation that they would have a certain number of customers who would pay those costs back. Now that there are fewer customers, they want to make sure that everybody pays their fair share of those costs. So those are two different things. Sounds like it's more like the true up that you're talking about.
Yeah, no, it's not the true up. This is, I'm looking really closely at these, and we have records because our system has a whole software package that tracks your use. And so if it was a true up, that would suggest that we didn't pay for 1,078 kilowatt hours of electricity used, right? And so that this is, and that doesn't, I went through it's a careful analysis month by
Yeah, you're gonna have
month.
to take that up with MCE.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Right.
we're gonna have to move on from this specific question, but there's
Thanks,
plenty
you
to
guys.
raise with Ken and MCE. Are there further questions? Okay, I don't see any additional questions, and so we're at the stage of the meeting where we'll have organizational reports. I guess, so I'm going to mix up the order a bit. Carlene, Lori, do you want to talk about Drive Clean Bay Area?
Yeah, I was thinking maybe Annika, do you want to?
Annika, sorry.
Sure. I'll do a quick update. Yes, so I wanted to just let everybody know that we, TAM has allocated money to every jurisdiction in Marin County for EV education and awareness. And we've worked with every jurisdiction and the County of Marin to gain them as they've all joined a campaign that we are running in the months of March and April called Ride and Drive Clean Marin. And we will be offering 3 EV car shows and 5 webinars for all 5 different webinars now talking a little bit about multifamily housing and what it's like to charge for people who live in multi-housing properties, as well as a deep dive on incentives that will be bilingual so people can really understand all of the great incentives that are available out there. So we're working hard, planning away on our Ride and Drive Clean Marin campaign.
Great.
And I'll just add to that we also will have some equity outreach to the canal and Marin City, and some of our programming will also be in Spanish as well.
Okay. So Kurt Johnson is here from the Climate Center, and Kurt, you put a comment in chat. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. Well, there's a lot I could say.
Well, briefly.
So briefly, the Climate Center is again working to see if state policy can be enacted in 2022 commensurate with the urgency of the climate crisis. All the climate target bills were killed in the legislature last year. We don't have a new targets bill yet, hoping there will be one. This is not public information yet, but we're hoping to have something posted shortly about putting together a climate policy summit and lobbying day in Sacramento in April, hoping to bring a lot of people to Sacramento to lobby their legislators, urging them to pass a climate targets bill commensurate with the urgency of the crisis. So if you're on the Climate Center newsletter list, you'll get information about that shortly. Thank you.
Great. David Moeller, EV Squad, BE Squad, Climate Reality Project. Are you still with us?
Yeah, I am. Thanks so much. Okay, I'll report on the EV Squad first, Electric Vehicle Squad. We're focused on a couple of key areas right now. Probably the biggest one is on charging infrastructure. Some of the items that Congressman Huffman talked about in terms of both at the federal level, Department of Transportation, also at the state level, the expenditure of the funds. We're working closely with Drive Clean Bay Area to try and really influence where those funds go, and that the distribution of those funds has proper provisions around them to make sure that the EV charging infrastructure that's installed is actually usable and meets its intended purpose. We're also working with a number of jurisdictions here in Marin County on their climate action plans and their transportation features in there to try and get EV provisions in. And then this program that Carlene and Annika talked about of the EV campaign this spring, we're working closely with them on that. On the Building Electrification Squad, we're really gearing up and working with county staff and the county's climate committee on developing that county all-electric ordinance. And we expect to be major players in encouraging all the Marin jurisdictions to join with the county and adopt all the same all-electric ordinance. We're also working with all the individual, or many of the individual jurisdictions right now on their own ordinances. So if the county level effort fails, the locals are moving along, and maybe the local jurisdiction levels will influence the county effort in a good way. So that's, and we're also coordinating with a number of other building electrification groups, especially in the South Bay, for lessons learned and making sure we're leveraging their good efforts to the maximum extent.
Great, thank you. Bill Carney, Sustainable San Rafael.
So quickly, one of the big things on our screen these days is the Northgate development. And it's a really great opportunity. It's a huge project, redoing the whole place, and a huge opportunity to create a real town center in northern San Rafael. So I just encourage everybody's attention to that. And it's an opportunity for things like electrification of the buildings and EV infrastructure to really be a major part of that, as well as, walkability and other things that have greenhouse gas impacts. So they're just starting their EIR. A good chance to weigh in. Actually, today is the last day for commenting on their scope, but there'll be a bunch of opportunities over the next year to weigh in on that. So I would encourage you all to consider that. The other thing that we're doing, we're looking a lot at trees these days, and it's boiled down to one particular tree, which is a beautiful London plane at the western entrance of San Rafael on 2nd Street. It's kind of, again, a larger than San Rafael issue because a lot of traffic goes by that spot. DPW is planning to take out a really wonderful and high sequestration tree, mature tree. And we're trying to figure out ways that can avoid doing that. We're trying to get them to come on board. So anybody interested in those topics, please let me know. Thanks.
Great. So Tom Flynn, Green Change.
Yeah, again, February 7th, I want everyone to be aware that our featured speaker at 6 p.m. is going to be Catherine Cahill, who is an internationally known climate scientist, who's a great communicator in terms of reaching the broader public. She happens to be a Christian evangelical, and she's been very effective in reaching a lot of the other side of the choir, essentially. And she's going to be talking about her new book, Saving Us. She's done a lot of other great writing. And it's, I think, just kind of a tremendous opportunity to have the ability to ask her questions and interact with her directly. So that's it's coming up February 7th. And then also, I as much as we can engage all of the community, and we're working with a number of schools now on this project to have a great Earth Day event, actually on the Sunday after Earth Day, April 26th, at the Mill Valley Community Center. This is both outdoor and indoor, and we're going to have music, we're going to have art, we're going to have games for kids. We're going to basically have something that's going to be a fun event celebrating the Earth, but also really drawing people to the climate cause in particular. So we really welcome everybody's participation in that. And it looks like we're going to be working with Drive Clean Bay Area on that event as kind of a joint event. There'll be an EV car show there at the same time. I'm not up on the very latest details, but we're working all that out.
Great. Yeah, and I think I mentioned this last time that Catherine Hayhoe is chief scientist at the Nature Conservancy. And so she's got a lot of credibility. Okay, so are there any other reports? Seeing none, I want to urge everybody to be at the Climate Action Working Group February 18th, with the lead topic being building electrification. Okay, well, thank you, folks.
Bob, this is Val. I'd just like to get back just a moment to what we learned from Congressman Huffman, because I think that with respect to each of the 4 issues that we brought up, some of the things are things we can really act on. You remember he talked about regulations and executive orders. He thought we could take response, we could support him on. So I think that we should follow up with that, because those were specific things he said we could do. So I just wanted to remind people that there was a lot of meat in what he talked about with respect to what he thinks are useful for us to do and maybe not as useful. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Bill. Bill, you have your hand up now.
Yeah, just quickly, I wanted to thank MCL for hosting Jared today, and particularly thank Bell for doing a great job of moderating that, and for bringing Jared to us, and as well as Martha and Bob and all those in the small group at MCL that helped put it together. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bill. That's great. Okay, does anybody else want to speak? Seeing no one.
Wait a minute. Hey, David, can I call you?
Well, we'll assume yes.
Okay, all right. Bye-bye.
Okay, I'll see you next month. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Bob.